Hiya, I'm just going to do a wee video on the different reasoning processes in logic, but before I do that I'll just state that I'm a flat earther, and what I mean by that is that I reject the idea that it's a globe and the claim that it's a globe. I reject that because I would have to believe it. I would have to give in to fallacious reasoning and appeal to consensus, history or authority for me to be able to take on that belief that it's a globe. And I've came from a place of believing and being easily deceived in a weak mindset before, and I'm now in a position of being able to know something for myself and ascertain my own reality. And it wouldn't seem like a logical position for me to give that up for a belief in something, or to appeal to authority or something, some other form of fallacious reasoning to ascertain my reality. So that's why I'm justified in my position, and I reject the claim that it's a globe. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny from a direct realist individual point of view. The claims that are within it can't be demonstrated. So I'm going to go through some of the different reasoning processes. There's deductive reasoning. It moves from the general to the particular, producing a necessary conclusion whose truth follows from that of the premises. 1. The first general statement, mythical animals do not really exist. The second particular statement, werewolves are mythical animals. The conclusion being werewolves do not really exist. It says here, given the truth of the assumptions, a valid deduction will always lead to a true conclusion. You can see that they've used deductive reasoning to deduce that werewolves do not really exist, but you can also see that they're telling you that there needs to be truthful assumptions for a valid conclusion to happen. And also it would seem more beneficial to me that you would use things, you would not try and prove a negative, but start with things that were objectively true in our reality and try and come to a true conclusion based on that. But that's just my opinion. Moving on to inductive reasoning, it begins with the particular and proceeds to the general. Things are observed and a rule or cause is proposed to account for them. This allows for innumerable general laws to be formulated which facilitate our daily lives and permit science to advance by hypothesis, tests and theories. It's got the first particular statement being I see an apple falling from a tree, and the second general being I see it happen again and again. I form a hypothesis to explain it, and then further experiments support my hypothesis, and it's elevated to theory, part of law. Okay, so and it states here the conclusion is probable rather than certain, which is why, strictly speaking, no scientific theory is regarded as being true. Now, I noticed the persuasive language. Basically, it's got strictly speaking, no scientific theory is regarded as being true. It's trying to persuade the reader that it is actually being regarded as true, but strictly speaking, yeah, it's persuasive language, and it's not really got a place in this sort of. The conclusion is probable rather than certain. That's this. Really all the statement that should be said there. I don't know why they've went on to try and persuade the reader with nonsense, but moving back to the inductive reasoning, they're using Isaac Newton's observation and then hypothesis of gravity as their inductive reasoning example. And if you know obviously about reasoning and forming hypothesis, you have to start with certain assumptions about things. If you're going to, for example, if you're hypothesising about gravity, you would have to have a framework for that to fit. You would have to assume a certain model at that point to apply your gravity to, and in this case they've assumed the globe model, obviously, applied gravity to it, the mathematical formulas worked, and that's created a mathematical model that they're happy with. And you can see how, if you're starting in these reasoning processes, if you're starting with a false assumption, that it'll lead you to a false conclusion. It'll turn up reasonable as a reasonable probability based on the fact that it's a globe. So it's reasonable to assume that it's a reasonable hypothesis to assume that gravity is necessary based on if we were living on a globe. But the point is to notice that it's only a reasonable assumption based on probability if the assumption is true, which in this case the assumption it's a globe. And the further experiments that support their hypothesis, we know also are other formal sciences and apparent observations and things of like larger masses attracting smaller masses and things that we cannot just demonstrate here in our reality on an individual basis. These are the other apparent further experiments that support their hypothesis. So we can see, just looking at inductive reasoning and looking through how you can start from a false misunderstanding or a false claim initially, a false assumption of something, to start off your hypothesis, and it'll lead you to that being probable under that assumption, but it doesn't make it a truthful thing in reality. Okay, that was the point I was trying to make. Moving on to abstract reasoning. Infers the truth of the best explanation for a set of facts, even if that explanation includes unobserved elements. It is a process of making educated guesses at why some given set of circumstances is the case. If it rains, the grass becomes wet. The grass is wet. Conclusion: it is most likely that it rained. You can see that using abductive reasoning, it's logical to go with the most likely thing and rule that out first. It's just it's the quickest way to go about it, more practical way. So, and that gets used by police and stuff like that. The conclusion is probable but not exclusive, and someone might have watered the lawn. You can see that using in this reasoning process, yes, it is most likely that it rained, but there is other explanations, so you would rule out the most likely explanation first and then move on to the other ones. 4. Analogical reasoning transfers information from a particular source to a particular target. It plays a central role in problem solving and cognitive perception. By using comparisons, similarities and correspondences, it is always preceded by inductive reasoning. 1. Many objects have been observed to share certain characteristics. 2. We induce a class of these things by their common characteristic and name it apples. 3. We observe a target which shares characteristics we have found to be typical of apples. 4. We reason analogically that it is also an apple. The conclusion is only probable it could be a plastic apple or something else. Analogical reasoning helps us observe patterns in the world and make on-the-spot decisions every day. However, if the wrong patterns are used, it falls into the analogical fallacy. You can see how we use that when we're just observing things we can't get to. We assume basically that they are things based on what we've witnessed before, but we can see how that could be subject to deceit or manipulation as well, or just misunderstanding. When we perceive things, we think we're perceiving things that we're not. So I wanted to the point being was to highlight that these are still good, these are valid reasoning processes, but just to recognise what they actually are, that they assume things, and based on that assumption it is probable. These set of things are probable based on certain assumptions. So yeah, that was all I was going to say, and I'll speak soon.